the British Library Food Season's big weekend. I'm Melissa Thompson, and I'm one of the co-directors of the season alongside Polly Russell, who founded the season, and Angela Cutton and Joe Allen. This weekend is a full weekend of amazing events and tastings and things like that. So I'd like, if you can, stick around and come again tomorrow. We've got food out in the piazza, and it's just a lovely celebration of all things food. I think language and food is such an evocative subject, and it's something that really winds people up, myself included, but also I think sparks discussion and is always evolving. Obviously, like with all language, what was said maybe like 20 years ago, kind of we don't really say it now. And I'm always fascinated in learning about different words and language used in food myself, and trying to always learn. And just thinking about why it's so important when we think about the language we do use. Chairing this event is the brilliant Jenny Lau, whose book, An A to Z of Chinese food, recipes not included, is just is an incredible book, which again is available to buy after this event. And please buy it, please read it, and get Jenny to sign it. And Jenny is obviously an author. She is a community organiser who works with the East and Southeast Asian Community Centre based in Hackney, and under her I don't know, like guardianship or just involvement has grown, and she's built this wonderful community of people from the East and Southeast Asian community, but beyond. Everyone's welcome, and everyone it kind of unites over food and just kind of community and just wanting to build connections. And so there's no one better to lead this discussion. I'm going to get off the stage now because you haven't come here to listen to me, you come here to listen to this incredible panel. I'll leave Jenny to introduce the panel. Also at the end, there will be questions. Jenny's going to tell you more about kind of questions to think about, but do think about them so that we can get as many questions in at the end. And that's it. Enjoy.
Thank you. Is this thing on? Okay, great. I was going to introduce myself, but clearly I don't need to. Thank you, Melissa. I'm also going to apologise. I'm getting through this awful cough. So if I run off stage and you hear me retching my guts out, I apologise in advance. I'm going to do a quick whip round and ask each of my speakers to introduce themselves before I introduce the topic of today.
Hi, my name is Olia Hercules. I'm a British-Ukrainian chef and cookbook author, and an author of an upcoming memoir as well.
Hi, I'm Sally Abbey. I'm the head of food at the Bull in Cholbury, and last year I also published my memoir, A Woman's Places in the Kitchen.
I'm Salma. I'm Egyptian, and I'm one half of Middle East, which is a platform that me and my husband do to share Middle Eastern food.
Thank you so much. And today's topic, An A to Z of Language and Food, takes its theme from my book, as Melissa mentioned, An A to Z of Chinese Food, which is a collection of 26 essays that use food to explore identity and essentially language as well, language and belonging in the Chinese diaspora, but also to explore how we use food to relate to the world. And language itself is a key theme in this book, themes of translation, of mistranslation, of Romanization, how we write the Chinese language in the Latin alphabet, but also ideas of language proficiency. If you're in the diaspora, for example, can you speak your mother or father tongue fluently, and what impact does that have on your identity and your relationship to cultural practices such as food? Food can often be a proxy language for those of us who are not linguistically fluent. So to kick off this talk, I'm going to read from my final chapter. As you may have guessed, they go from A to Z. And it's very apt, actually, because today is Dragon Boat Festival, 31st of May, and this is the day that we eat zongzi, which is a kind of glutinous rice dumpling. And chapter Z is for zongzi. It's about a moment when I realized I kept calling these dumplings zongzi, and I published an article about zongzi. And what I realized was I didn't call it what I would normally call it in my Chinese language of Cantonese. which would be zhong. And zongzi are actually, there's a multiplicity of words that you could call them, but for some reason I was defaulting to this common Chinese word for it. So at the expense of, I guess, an authenticity to myself, I was trying to make myself intelligible to a wider audience. Only my fellow diaspora will know the pain of struggling with one's mother tongue while being dealt the sting of seeing non-Chinese, mainly white folks, be celebrated for their proficiency in Chinese language and culture. It's doubly painful when we see that praise coming from within the Chinese community. How many of my readers have had their parents turn to them and say, "Look how that Lau Wai speaks better Chinese than you." If others ask, "Why don't you all just learn Chinese?" the answer is, it's not that simple. As a friend of mine remarked, going back to fill in the gaps of your own culture and history is like doing homework of the most painful and traumatic nature. The Lau Wai can conquer a new language, often in the colonial sense of the word, without baggage or inhibitions. They don't know that they have mangled the microtonal pronunciation of a syllable that renders the Chinese word for si, or time, or si, lion, or si, try, all into the meaning for si, shit. She, see? The Lau Wai is held in lenient regard, for our own parents condone them as if the white parents we had wished for. And this is an example of white privilege. Meanwhile, the Chinese person, regardless of whether they grew up in the whitest village in Wales, is expected to be impeccably Chinese, while also a perfect immigrant who has erased all traces of their foreignness. Is it any wonder that the Chinese diaspora are so protective of their food, their proxy language, when outsiders try to take that from them too? Then I'll skip a bit. A zhong is like the parable of the blind men with the elephant. You know the one. A group of blind men encounter an elephant for the first time and, touching different parts of the beast, come away with a completely different perception of it. "It's like a wall," says the man who touches the flank of the elephant. "No, it's like a thick rope," argues the man who touches the trunk. "I disagree. It's like a pillar," says the man who encounters the leg. 100 people may see a zhong, know a zhong, have eaten a zhong, and still call it by a different name. In the US, some might even call it a Chinese tamal, simply because Mexican tamales, albeit wrapped in corn husks, are more familiar to them. When I had my first tamal at my Mexican friend's supper club, I exclaimed, "Oh, it's like a Mexican zhong." So you can roughly divide the Chinese foodie world into two. One half would be delighted if you called it a Chinese tamal. The other would respond with apoplectic convulsions. I once saw someone do the latter regarding chang fan, Cantonese steamed rice rolls, that had been labelled Chinese cannelloni on the packaging, insinuating that this was a heinous eradication of Chinese culture. But the manufacturer was a British Chinese factory. How wrong could this person have been? The manufacturer was conserving our food culture by making our food intelligible to outsiders. Is that kind of tactical translation not a form of survival? Arguments about language and identity are like arguments about how to wrap zhong. I do believe in arguing. These arguments are not trivial. They show us what civilians, not just the academics and social scientists, care about. For marginalized diaspora who have endured layer and layer upon layer of daily microaggressions, social exclusion, and intergenerational rupture, it is easier to argue about the small things, like whose recipe is more authentic or whose spelling is correct. Anyway, that was from Z is for zongzi, or, and then I give a whole list of the other names that it's known by. So the format of our talk today is very simple. I'm going to ask each of my speakers, what is the one food word you are willing to fight about? And at the end, I'm going to leave a healthy 15 minutes for Q&A, but it's going to be a different kind of Q&A because we're going to be queuing and you're going to be A-ing. I want you guys to think about what the one food word you are willing to fight about is. And I will be asking the audience. So get thinking while you listen. We're going to start with Salma. What is the one food word you're willing to fight about?
Hummus. That's the hill I'm willing to die on.
Tell us.
Can I get a show of hands of who knows what the word hummus means? Not the dip, just the word. Okay, this is why. So hummus, the word hummus means chickpeas. It's not, we as Arabs use the word hummus as like a shortcut or an abbreviation for what the dish actually means. The dip comprises of hummus and tahini. These are essential bits. But now, everywhere we go, well, we don't have to go anywhere, but just looking at our phones, everything is labeled hummus when it doesn't have a single chickpea in there. And that just, it can really upset me. It turns, oh my God. You can tell how this is triggering me right now. But you get pea hummus, lentil hummus, fava bean hummus, and it's not hummus. Hummus is chickpeas, right? So that is why this is the word I'm willing to fight about. You know, people, you know, in the Middle East, us as Arabs, food is everything. It's such a big part of our culture, and in so many other, and I'm sure it's the same for other cultures as well, right? But for us, it's such a big part of, you know, everything is around food. If you go to anyone's place, there's always going to be food, there's going to be a spread. Even if you're going to have a tea or a coffee with someone, there's always going to be a spread of something, you know? And we take our food so seriously, and we try to preserve the recipes. I won't say recipes, but the dish, the essence of the dish as much as possible. So then when you find more dominant cultures coming and taking your recipes and just, you know, completely obliterating it and calling it something that isn't, that really, I think, it's very offensive, you know, I think that when you make a recipe, that's not from your culture. You should respect that culture. You should try and, you know, do it justice. That's why I think it really triggers me.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, hummus has become very popular in the last few decades, I would say 15 years, and it is pretty much this kind of global fridge item, and it's on every, you know, supermarket shelf. Where do you think this confusion, or rather ignorance, about the meaning of hummus comes from?
I think it comes from people who are not from the culture sharing these recipes. You know, it's okay for you to share these recipes, but at least you have to do it justice. You have to understand what the essence of that dish or that dip that you're creating is. So, I mean, hummus has been around since the 13th century, right? It's been documented, and it's been documented in Syrian books, in Egyptian books. You know, even though hummus is not very prominent in Egypt right now, but it used to be very popular back then. You know, it's in a cookbook from then, right? And from then, the elements of hummus still has not changed. There's chickpeas, there's tahini, or tahina, as we would say it, sesame paste, and there has to be an acid. So now we have, you know, lemons all year round, right? But back then, that wasn't the case. So they would use whatever acid they had on hand, so preserved lemons instead of fresh lemons. You can use a vinegar. And then there were different varieties. So now, like, a lot of people will tell you, like, hummus. I used to say that before, you know, I went deep into the research. Like, I'm such a purist when it comes to my recipes, and I always like to, you know, stick to certain things. And if I'm going to change things around, you know, I say that this is not the traditional way, or this is like my take on it, right? But there always has to be tahini. There always has to be an acid, whatever form that is back then. And we've adapted this now to the ingredients that we have and the tools that we have, you know, just same that goes for, the creamiest hummus. That's a new thing. That's more of a contemporary thing. And I won't lie, I enjoy very smooth hummus. Like, give me a gritty hummus, I will not have it, right? But back then, they didn't have these tools to make it into a creamy, dreamy hummus, right? But now, again, you get all these, I would say it's more of a misinformation thing on how to get your creamy, dreamy hummus, which is another thing that I always fight about, peeling your chickpeas. I'm like, you don't need to peel every single thing.
Who's got your time to peel a chickpea?
Exactly. I'm like, I'm sorry, but can you imagine an Arab mom sitting in her kitchen peeling every single chickpea? Like that, I'm sorry, nobody's got time for that. Like making hummus is a time-consuming process. So, you know, you don't need to add peeling chickpeas onto that, right? And again, I think that came from other people, not from the culture, sharing this. But then I see Arabs saying that now, and I'm just like, no.
There's been a misinformation loop.
Exactly, you know, which is fine. I mean, if that's what you want to do, I mean, sit there and peel your chickpeas, that's totally fine. But I know I'm not going to do it. But then going back to that again, like back then, you didn't have a creamy, dreamy hummus. But you have to have your essential elements, which is the acid, the tahini, and your chickpeas. So,
yeah, so it sounds like, you know, part of this confusion comes from people using the word hummus, not knowing what hummus actually means. And you mentioned you write recipes, and I know you're working on a cookbook. And you're very particular, to bring it back to language, you're very particular about the language you use. I see recipes where people might, you know, use the kind of Romanized version of a word, and some recipes where they might translate it. So, you know, maybe 20 years ago we would have said, it's a chickpea dip,
yeah.
which would have perhaps avoided that kind of confusion. And now it's hummus, but hummus has become, you know, a family of dips that are not just
Yeah, it's
chickpea-based.
just synonymous with the word dip rather
Right.
than the chickpeas.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a bit more about the process of how you worked with language and translation in your cookbook and on your YouTube channel?
I mean, so we keep hummus as is. So if we're talking about language in terms of hummus, but like the dish, the dip, hummus, is actually has different names across the region. Right. So in some countries it will be hummus b'tahina, which just means hummus with tahini. It will be in some areas it will be called msabbaha, which means like swimming, you know. But in another place, in another country, msabbaha will be another chickpea dish, right? So it just depends where you're coming from. And we, in our recipes, we tend to go, because our audience is mainly a non-Arab audience, so we go for the word that will be, I guess, the more general word that people will understand. We do mention other variations, or what it would be if we're focused on a specific country. So if I tell you this recipe is from, you know, I don't know, Lebanon, Palestine, I'll tell you what they say there. You know, like, okay, they call it this dish. But for the sake of that, for the sake of ease and appeal, you know, you have to appeal to the algorithm. and actually, this is one of our arguments. Me and Ovi, he always wants to go with the, you know, I don't know, the like your cannelloni example.
Yes.
You know, and I'm just like, please don't say that. Please don't say that.
What are some examples of what Obi has suggested?
Like not hummus related, but like, I don't know, an Egyptian mac and cheese, and I was like, mac and cheese, this is not mac and cheese. But it's you know, it's again, it's what you have to do. You have to think about, how can I appeal to how can I get that person to want to listen to this, right? Because at the end of the day, we're trying to debunk certain myths, and also teach you about our culture through food. So how am I gonna get your foot in, right? I just gotta have to do it that way.
And just to segue a little, because your educational sort of channel is about Middle Eastern food, which is such a contentious word as well, and in a kind of invented sort of region and category and identity. How do you how do you reckon with that?
So the way that we try to do, so again, actually before yesterday I was like, oh, maybe I should have chosen Middle Eastern cuisine as my word. Because in reality, it's not a single cuisine. It's generally lumped into one big mammoth, when in reality we're like, 15, 16 different cuisines, and they're all lumped together. There's so, the food can differ between regions in the same country, let alone throughout the entire region. So it's frustrating, to go to a restaurant and be like, oh, this is Middle Eastern food. But okay, Egyptian food is very different than Lebanese food, than Palestinian food, than Sudanese food, than countries from the Gulf. It's so different. But the way we try to do this is make sure with every recipe, we mention that it's where it's from and how it's done. And the way I tackle this is going to primary sources. So because I speak Arabic, I have that, I think it's such a privilege that I can actually understand these sources, and I go into primary sources and I ask people from the region, and I do my research, whether it's books, videos, articles, and I always make sure to double check it with someone who is from the actual place, because it's such a big responsibility. I can't just claim that, okay, this recipe is, I'm Egyptian, so I know what's in our foods or not, but I can't just go out and say, okay, this recipe is Egyptian and I've added pomegranate molasses, which is not an ingredient that we use. We can use it, we use it a lot more now because of the influx of refugees, right? But it's not in our core dishes. You won't find it there. So, that's what I try to do.
And so beyond the definition of hummus, why do we fight about hummus?
The dish, the word?
Both.
I think, again, that goes to what I mentioned earlier about how food is such a big part of our culture. And as such, I wouldn't say we're a minority, right? But we're not dominant cultures. The Middle East are not dominant, but what we have is our food. And then when someone comes and takes something that is not theirs and claims it to be, or no, they don't claim that hummus is theirs, but then you're taking part of our culture and you are attempting to show it to the world a certain way when in reality it's not. So I think that's why, it's something that you get it is very personal. Food everything is done around food. I'm going to visit my mom next week and she's been unwell and she's, in the hospital, and the first thing she tells me, she's like, what do you want to eat? What can I prepare for you? And that's how important food is for us. It's such a big part of culture.
Great. Okay, lots to think about. Yeah. Sally, what is the one food word you choose to fight about?
So my word is chef. There's a few gasps from the audience.
Please.
I think the word chef is very contentious for me and for a lot of people. I think when I told you guys, you both were like, we have things to say about that. So I was looking into, well, actually, I said to you, Jenny, didn't I? I have been very badly learning French on Duolingo for 574 days. And I was surprised when the word chef came up on Duolingo, and in French it means boss, which I didn't know, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then when you look into the actual word chef in the English language, it's only been in the dictionary since 1934 in its current meaning. And it actually comes from chef de cuisine, so boss of the kitchen. But obviously it's been anglicised and now is just chef, and it means to cook in the kitchen. But I just think it comes with so many layers of complexity, because you say the word chef and suddenly there's, an image of a big floppy-haired, shouty man.
Man.
Shouty man, yes, definitely. I mean, if you ask ChatGPT to create a chef, it will create a man. I have done that, so just to prove a point. But I think, you know, the word is very contentious for me because it has so many meanings. And obviously, I am a chef, but I hate being called chef. And I say all the time, like, I almost called my book Don't Call Me Chef. Like, that was one of the other titles, like, in my head. Because I think you don't say, hey, electrician, or hey, plumber. So why are you saying yes, chef? The whole thing is very strange for me. And I think there's a lot of arrogance and ego surrounding the word chef. And that's why I don't like to be called that, because I don't want to be like, I am the chef, I'm the king of the castle. And, you know, it makes kind of I think some people feel then they are better and they're more superior than they actually are. And I think a lot of kitchens, people behave as though, you know, it's life or death, and actually it's just food. You know, it's just food, and we're not doing anything more important or less important than anybody else that does any other job, just because we're making food. And I find it, I don't know, the word, when somebody says, yes, chef, to me, it kind of makes my toes curl in my shoes. I'm just like, just call me Sully. And they're like, but it's a respect thing. And I was like, I know, and I know you respect me. We've established that. My name is Sally. You know, and it's interesting the way the word sort of travels, because you can say yes, chef, in a very respectful way, but you can also say yes, chef, in a very arsey way as well. And I think it's interesting. I think that's more of what we do, like, in kitchens. We use the word chef depending on what sort of mood we're in and who we're responding to. Like, if there are two chefs in a kitchen and one of them tells the other one what to do, but they're both the same level, then it will be a very sarcastic, yes, chef, you know, as if, don't tell me what to do. Whereas if it's the actual boss, then they'll be like, yes, chef. And it's the intonation of the way you say it. It can mean very, very different things. So, yes.
It carries quite a lot of fluid meaning
as well. It does, yeah, definitely. And I think, again, I think based on, you know, the way traditional fine dining, you know, French kitchens have been run for the last, 100 or so years, I think that has why the word chef has ended up where it is. And it makes me really sad when people say, oh, I'm not a chef, I'm a cook. Why? Like, what is the difference between a chef and a cook, other than Delia Smith and Nigella get referred to as cooks, and, you know, Tom Kerridge and Paul Ainsworth get referred to as chefs?
A lot of women in particular that I know who are chefs are always very hesitant to call themselves that, and there is always this gendered dynamic between who gets called a cook and who gets called a chef.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
Oh, 100%. 100%.
May I chime in?
Yes, please.
So, because I said that I'm a chef before when we started this thing, and so I have a big troubled kind of relationship with the word. So I came to the UK 22 years ago, and I retrained in the culinary school in 2010, so quite a while now. And I worked in restaurants. And I think the reason why I started, so in Ukrainian, by the way, chef, it comes from French, so it also means the boss.
Yeah.
And actually for ages, I would go to Ukraine and I'd be like, they would use the word chief to say chef. It was like a really confused thing. Anyway, so I started calling myself a chef because I was a chef de partie in a few restaurants. And I think my kind of like why I started calling myself a chef was due to lack of confidence and this kind of like fight for, you know, I just really wanted to be, you know, to be taken seriously, I suppose. And you know, and there were a couple of head chefs that used to say like, once I stopped, that'd be like, oh, you're just a housewife cook or something like that. So there was a lot of this kind of putting down. And that really hurt me. And for ages, I was like, okay, I really need to like call myself a chef. You know, at that point, I didn't even know that there was this kind of like difference or, you know, the argument between cook and a chef. So kind of I got stuck with it. And then recently, I've been thinking a lot about being a cook and being a chef. And actually, I am a cook because most of my food comes from from Ukraine, from everything that I've learned through my family, through my grandmother. I've explained what my mom is my mom is such an incredible cook. When she makes phyllo pastry, she can throw it in the air and like spin it like a pizzaiolo. You know what I mean? So her skills are actually a lot more complex than loads of the chefs that I know. So I was like, oh, I really need, like, kind of, it's on my Instagram, it's like in all of my bios. I'm like, oh, I really need to kind of like change that now. But now in the kind of Ukrainian, because in the Ukrainian kind of like sphere, I feel like it'd be really difficult to explain to them. Like, it just becomes really complicated now. They're like, what? So are you a chef? Are you, you know, they wouldn't understand the difference. So I'm kind of like this, stuck in this purgatory of like this cooking identity. But I agree with you. I've now kind of like embraced the whole kind of the beauty of being called a cook and not having to adapt this essentially like a very male macho word. But yeah, I'm a little bit stuck. So I was very excited to hear you talk about it.
I think we reclaim it.
I think there's also this, I guess, there's the professional kind of boundary of who cooks for a living, and then there's people who cook, but perhaps don't make money from it. But, you know, like we're in a world now where people are cooks, but also write books, you know, do supper clubs, do this, do that, create products. And are they technically chefs in a kind of kitchen brigade?
It's hard to know where to draw the line, isn't it? Yeah, because I'd say like if you, like to cook is the verb, right? And but then if you cook for a living and you get paid for it, then in my eyes that makes you a chef. But then you say that, and then you know Brooklyn Beckham starts doing recipe videos on Instagram, and I would probably not call him a chef. No offense to Brooklyn Beckham, but yeah, it's a difficult word, and it is like what. And I think that's the thing. It's like I proudly call myself a chef because I cook for a living and I've worked very hard. And I think, you know, if someone were to call me a cook, I would be offended by that. Just because obviously I've, you know, worked in restaurants for the last 20 years. But I think that people that cook for a living should be able to call themselves, so you should proudly call yourself.
I'm going to reclaim.
Good.
I'm going to change it today.
Salma, would you call yourself a chef?
Yeah, it's fantastic.
No, it actually drives me nuts when someone calls me a chef. I was like, I haven't earned it. So I don't have the training that chef goes through, right? So I feel like it's unfair to be called chef. I do have my experience, right, in the kitchen cooking, but that's, you know, from what I have done, but I haven't gone through the same rigorous training, the sleepless nights, the long shifts, the this, the that.
But what is training? You know, Olia learned everything from her mother.
I did go to culinary school.
Well, yes, but you're saying that everything that you cook now is learned.
Absolutely.
But she's worked at restaurants as well, right? And
I have.
But and I think that's a very I've worked in a bakery for like a month, and I used to come home crying every night, every day, you know, like, oh, my feet hurt so much, right? And I do stand a lot at home, you know, like, you know, but it's a different kind of stress, it's a different kind of training, and I think it's unfair to be called chef when I haven't gone through that suffering, I would say.
And you've got people like Jeremy Lee, who's, you know, a restaurateur chef, you know, of Quo Vadis fame, and I believe that he very specifically says he's a cook. I'd never heard him call himself a chef.
But do you think that's because of the way the word chef is regarded, rather than what he actually does? Because he runs a restaurant, cooks in a restaurant, he is a chef.
He's really nice to work with. Maybe he's like, I'm not this shouty chef, so I don't want to be called that.
Maybe because of the connotation that it is a shouty chef. And like, it's funny you say I've not suffered to have that title, but should we have to suffer to be able to call it? And also, should every restaurant make its employees suffer in order to have this title of chef? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. And I don't know, I mean, I've only ever worked in modern European French-esque restaurants, but I don't know in like other cultures, in other restaurants, like how that word is used and interpreted. But it'd be interesting to know.
Yeah, it seems like the kind of the image and the connotations now precede the word and the label itself.
Yeah.
And once again, there's a kind of misunderstanding about what the French word actually means.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, it's funny because when you're at, you know, in a room at a party or and you say, I'm a chef, suddenly everybody wants to talk to you. Like, sometimes if my social battery's low, I'm like, oh, I'm an accountant, and then you just get but and everybody's like, what is your signature dish? And it's a real talking point because obviously everybody loves food and everybody can connect with food. But I think there is certainly like an image of a chef. And I think it's interesting, obviously, you know, since, I don't know how long it's been that Instagram has been going crazy, 10 years maybe? You know, since that sort of social media explosion, I think the people that are cooking and the people that are looked at cooks and chefs, it's all changed. It's completely turned on its head, because before there was, you know, a very select few of women that were making, you know, recipes like Nigella and like Delia, etc. And then there were the, you know, Gary Rhodes and Ainsley Harrietts, and it was the view to the world of it was a lot smaller. But now, with the advent of social media, anybody can go online and cook in any way they want. And I find it very fascinating, because I spend way too much time on Instagram. But, you know, you see the videos pop up of people cooking angrily, or people saying, I don't know how to do this, but I'm going to try it. Or then people doing a really bad job, which seems to be on purpose. And it's all, some of it's for humour. And it's just very interesting how it's all sorts of interweaves. Like, do you know What Will He Cook?
Yes.
He basically started it for a bit of fun, and he you know, professes that he's not, you know, an expert in any, you know, stretch of the imagination, but he just really loves food. And I just think it's nice that social media has been able to allow people to explore with food in ways that they probably wouldn't have done before.
Fascinating. All right, I want to hear people's thoughts on this one as well. And finally, Olia, your word. Olia's word changed very last minute, but for good reason.
Yeah. I mean, it's all the same argument, I think.
Yeah,
but yeah, I just thought I'd pick a word which is a little bit more familiar to people. Originally, it was going to be kvass, and then I thought, actually, let's go with Borsch.
And please clarify how you spell Borsch.
Okay, so the way I'm going to tell you how it's spelled in Ukrainian, it's only 4 letters. So the last kind of like, I spell it with B-O-C-S-C-H. In America, it's spelled with a T, and there's a reason for that. But in Ukrainian, it's, the last letter is like an E that fell over, and it's the letter sh. So Borsch. So as I mentioned before, I came to the UK 22 years ago, and actually I left Ukraine when I was almost 13. So I lived in Cyprus for 5 years, and then I've been here since I was 18. And when I arrived here, I mean, there were moments of this in Cyprus as well, but when I arrived here, and actually the whole foodie kind of thing exploded, you know, and I was just interested, and I just looked online, and there were so many kind of like blended up beetroot soups that were called Borsch. And I was like, no, no, this is, we do not do that. It's not a blended soup. That's kind of like one bit that kind of made me feel a little bit weird. And then the second bit was that all over it said it's a Russian soup, or like the Russian Borsch. And again, you know, at that point I was like, okay, it makes me feel a little bit weird, but you know, it's fine. But since especially for a while now, but especially since the full-scale invasion, Borsch has actually been, we have a chef in Ukraine called Yevhen Klopotenko, and he fought really hard, and it's now one of the UNESCO heritage cultural kind of protected dishes. It's there with a French baguette. There are actually not that many of them, like 9 or 10 to date. And the reason why he fought so much for it is because one of the tools, one of the weapons that Russia is using now and has used for hundreds of years is, you know, the Russian culture. It's amazing, and it's all Russian, and, you know, Ukrainian artists, Ukrainian writers, you name it, musicians, they came from Ukraine, but they were in the, you know, in the global kind of understanding, it was Russian. And the same was said for Borsch. And, you know, I don't mind if Borsch is cooked everywhere in Eastern Europe. It's cooked it's called Borsch in Poland. It's obviously, it's cooked in Russia. It's cooked in many Eastern European countries and beyond. But for us at the moment, it's a fight against the erasure of our culture, and it's a fight to reclaim our culture, because when I arrived here, it felt like Ukraine was this massive blind spot on the map. Literally, people were like, oh, you're Ukrainian, so you're Russian. It's like, no. And then you had to explain about the language, about the literature, about all of those things. And people were just like, oh, no, you don't know. Or even they wouldn't even know where it was. And they were like, oh, Ukraine, where is that? It's like, you guys are right. It's like a massive country. Like, it's bigger than France. It's the biggest country in Europe. Like, what do you mean you don't know where it is? And, you know, so to me, it was just like bubbling up, bubbling up, bubbling up. And when the full-scale invasion happened, I just thought, okay, it's really time to really reclaim our cuisine. And I, you know, I speak from experience as well. It's not just kind of like an anecdotal thing, like, oh, we cook loads of borscht in Ukraine. We do. It's almost like if we had an expression of, you know, I don't know, there's an expression about rice maybe in Asian cultures, and, you know, have you eaten borscht today? Probably would be something that you would ask a Ukrainian. It's just massive. Like, my mom comes over, like, she has to have it at least 3 days a week. Like, it's you know, it's a really, really important dish. And for my third cookbook, Summer Kitchens, which is a cookbook about Ukrainian cuisine, I actually, luckily, was able to go out to Ukraine just before the pandemic started, and we traveled all around Ukraine, well, to the areas that we were able to go to. And I went into people's homes and villages, and I interviewed them, and I asked about different dishes, about dishes that do not exist anymore. And for example, there's in northern Ukraine, there's an area called Polisia. It's it's like loads of woods and marshes, and it's this beautiful place, like very different from where I'm from in the south in Ukraine. And I asked them, and they said, look, we had this borscht that used to be made with elvers. So elvers are baby eel. And to me, it was just like, okay, I know that there's about 300 types of borscht that's cooked in Ukraine. And actually, in my own region, from village to village, you get different variations. But that was a complete discovery. And I said, well, how come you don't make it anymore? And they said, well, during the Soviet Union, Stalin had this massive kind of policy program of, they called it the conquest of nature. So not only people had to bow down, nature had to bow down. So he was turning these, so in the south of Ukraine, he created loads of these dams and reservoirs and destroyed villages, destroyed people's homes, destroyed the environment. And they to basically create more arable land for industrial farming. And he was doing the complete opposite up north. So where they had these marshes and swamps, they were drying them out. So that borscht doesn't exist anymore. And yeah, so to me, having seen all of these variations and how much we have lost, it's become really, really important to explain to people that this is our national dish and it's now protected. So talking about it and getting people to cook it or to want to learn about it is kind of like an act of resistance.
I love that. So would you say there's been this kind of effort to homogenize borscht into a kind of, you know, nationalized identity? And I also find that people can't get their heads around the fact that there can be multiplicities or multitudes of a dish, right? As you would with hummus across the Middle East, as you would with borscht, as you would with, you know, I don't know, zhong, or even congee, which is another thing that I cook a lot of.
For me, the problem is that, especially I think when the whole like online and argument, you know, the Russian government has come out and said it's a Russian dish and this is Russian, you know, heritage, and actually Ukraine doesn't exist anymore. Ukrainian culture doesn't exist anymore. Ukrainians are the Russians that have gone bad, and we have to conquer them, take their land, and re-educate them and make them good Russians again. You know, so for me, it's that. It's like, I don't mind if you cook borscht in Moscow, of course you will. But like, it was this kind of just imposition of this culture, which has been going on for centuries. Like, this is not a new conflict. Yes, Ukraine, you know, Putin, before he invaded, he said, Ukraine doesn't have a history of statehood, you know, so they don't exist. They're not allowed to exist as a nation. So it's the fight against that. It's the fight against extermination of Ukrainians in our culture.
You mentioned that borscht is spelt with a T in the States.
Yeah, from what I know, the history of that is actually quite a lot of Jewish Ukrainians and Russians, I guess, would have emigrated, I think, quite early on, like in the 19th century or something like that, when they brought the word to America. And perhaps because that sh has such a strong kind of like sound, they've put a T in the end. Some people are bothered by that, but actually that's one thing. I'm just like, it's semantics, I don't really mind, that's okay.
And because you've authored several cookbooks before your memoir, actually, have you ever found that you had to fight about certain words and the way you wrote them with your publishers or with, I don't know?
Yeah, yes. The spelling, you mean? So actually,
the language,
the language
of spelling,
yeah, the language and the spelling. You know what? I have been quite lucky with my publishers. I haven't had to fight loads, but the word kvass, which I nearly went into. Somebody asked me to contribute kind of my knowledge about. So kvass, to explain, it comes from a really ancient Slavic word to sour. Essentially, it's just to make something sour. And and there's all sorts of kvasses. There's a bread kvass where you ferment a little bit of rye bread with water and honey. There's in Ukraine we use beetroot kvass a lot, where you ferment beetroots and then you add it to your borscht. So for some reason in English it's spelled with double S, and I've double checked, and literally, you know, this word exists in, I don't know, 20 Eastern European languages, and every one of them has one S, and I was just like, well, this is a Ukrainian kvass, so would you guys be okay? I'll do it, but would you be okay to use one S? I don't know, it just felt like I just wanted to be with one S. Are you all right with that? And actually they were, but then the copy came back, and you know, as an example, they were like, oh, it exists in Russia and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, for now, I don't really, can we put Poland instead? Yeah. At the moment, I just don't want it to be there whilst they're trying to kind of doing what they're doing. So yeah, but it's an interesting thing about language. I thought I'd be a lot more bothered by the tea with the borscht, but actually I'm not.
It is, but I think for people who work across languages, especially with romanization, so romanizing would be when you take non-Latin scripts such as Chinese, Ukrainian, Arabic, and you have to work out ways of spelling them with the Latin alphabet, you know, the A to Z. Historically, there have been different kind of romanization systems to allow us to, you know, standardize the way we romanize, but then there are different, even in Chinese, there are like historically different romanization systems. Some are a bit more outdated, some have evolved, you know, like independently, so you can almost tell where someone is from or what era they were writing in based on how they would have romanized a Chinese word. But people do get very upset if you do not romanize the way they might, right? And it's part of the kind of burden, I write about this in my book, the burden of being a polyglot and of being multilingual is you're so sensitive to not just your community, your culture, but to the other side, and you can often be, you know, torn between doing what you think is right and what others want you to do, to represent them correctly.
Yeah, and you know, recently another kind of like big thing in Ukraine now is because it's literally, it is like an existential struggle at the moment. So all of these things have just suddenly have become really important about reclamation, about language, etc. And actually there's this new way of transliterating, I don't know how new, maybe it's like 10, 15 years old, but words that are transliterated, I'm used to the Russian transliteration of things. But Ukrainians are like, no, now this transliteration thing is going to be completely different. And it's actually a little bit complicated, or at least I found that. So if any Ukrainians here, you get my new memoir, I tried my best, but there's probably going to be quite different transliterations. But it's a really interesting way that people kind of like choose to reclaim their identity and their culture.
Yeah.
Or create something new, because this transliteration is a new thing, but that's what kind of like sets us apart.
Great. Okay, and that was Borsch. I'm going to leave a healthy amount of time for discussion because I feel like there may be some interesting words that you have come up with, but also feel free to ask a question to any of the panelists or to myself. So put up your hand if you have a word that you want to talk about. 1, 2, yeah, quite a few. Okay, this lady or this person put their hand up first.
Can you wait for more? It's coming. I'm not falling down this stairs.
Thank you very much for that. I think each word might deserve a whole session on its own. There's so much to say, there's so much I want to say, but I'll just summarize it. I'm Lebanese-Palestinian, so I completely related to everything that Salma, in fact, Olia as well said, because hummus is our borscht. And I think Salma calling it misinformation about hummus is quite sort of benign. It's sort of an intentional cancellation of culture. And it's the essence of who we are, hummus. Closely followed up by falafel. That's, I can't, the things that are in little plastic boxes in supermarkets are not falafel, believe me. They're just call them veggie bites. You know, falafel have to be freshly deep fried. They have to be hot when you eat them, crispy on the outside, fluffy on the inside. So that's my bugbear. But my word would be traditional.
Me too.
And
Me too.
I respect tradition very much. I like to create my own with my family. But I hate the use of the word traditional to sort of quell creativity and as a dismissal of things. So just as an example, so my husband is Chinese, and I love creating in the kitchen. And so for my tabbouleh, I put a bit of soya sauce in the dressing. Now, you know, try it and then tell me you don't like it, and it's fine. But don't say you can't do that. You can do everything in the kitchen. Food is about that. It's about unifying people. Anyway, so I will stop there, but thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Perfect amount of time to be speaking as well. Don't try to keep it succinct. Anyone else? Oh, this person with the curly hair and the green top.
Well, probably I've got 2 points to make, probably both contentious, but I have to say, and I know Salma, and we've talked quite a lot, but you know, I'm Jewish, and I'm Jewish and I'm Lithuanian, and you know, we love hummus. And we love falafel too. We're not claiming it's ours or yours, but we're, you know, it's Middle Eastern. So I wanted to make that point. And I know a lot of people in the food world don't seem to like anything Jewish at the moment, but we are Middle Eastern too, and we deserve a voice. But the word I want to say, which is probably even more contentious, is foodie. And I know everyone groans, and I know I've had a vested interest because I wrote a book a long, long time ago called How to Be a Better Foodie. It was about 18 years ago now, and it was kind of quite avant-garde. Love it still, you know, still resonates. But no one seems to have come up with a better word. And, you know, sometimes I squirm a bit, and I called my Substack that partly because someone said it would be good for publishing my next book, which is completely different to that, I hasten to add. But so many people, you know, and a lot of people I respect just, you know, openly say, I can't bear the word, but none of them come up with anything better. So there we go.
How do you feel about foodie?
I like the word food. I think it's a good term to express that you like food more than normal people.
Who's next? Let's work our way up. Lady with the blue top and glasses. Navy blue.
Thank you for the matching mic. My word is gyoza. Yep, I love Japanese food, but I think gyoza has hijacked all the other dumplings that exist in East Asia.
That is true. Yeah, that is true.
I'm a chef. I see buyers in supermarket. When I describe dumplings to them in Chinese, they stare at me blankly, like I just dropped in from outer space. Our dumplings existed long before gyoza. Learn your history, people. You know, and there's only one dimension in Japanese gyoza, and it's only pork and cabbage. In Chinese dumplings, it's just multiple. You can put anything in it. It's very democratic. You can put hummus in it if you want. But there's no restriction. That's why I love, the word gyoza is just too contentious for me. And I work in a Chinese company, and when I put the word dumplings, I have Chinese colleagues from different parts of China, Taiwan, Southeast Asia, Burma, and they looked at me, can you say this in, what kind of dumplings? So I have to come up with different language that they understand. And my Korean colleague, I said, oh, some kind of mandu. Oh, yeah. But yeah, gyoza, and everybody expected to be eaten pan-fried, crispy bottom. No, it can be boiled. Most dumplings are boiled in China. But yeah, that's me, that's my bugbear.
Wonderful. You must read my chapter, P is for Pan-Asian, which is about the Japanese cultural supremacy over other Asians and how it came about, and gyoza is a very good example. Who's next? Yes, just behind the person who spoke.
So this is something I spend a lot of time thinking about because I'm a recipe translator. I work with British chefs who are being published into the US, and I have to translate their recipes for American cooks. And my word is cups.
Why?
So this is exactly what I'm talking about, because cups, it's a system of measurement based on volume. And I know you guys measure based on weight.
How big is a cup? Teacup?
You can buy cups on the internet for several pounds, and then you know what it is. I think there's a fundamental intransigence about the very idea that someone would use a different measurement system. And if you express that lack of tolerance towards pretty much anything else, how would you appear to others? But because it's this, I think, and to be fair, yes, the American hegemony has existed for a really long time, so it's very easy to say, like, that's not acceptable, why are you trying to, you guys almost feel imposed upon by it. But at the same time, it's just a different way of doing things, and it's really not that hard. It's just basic math.
It's inconvenient. Okay, I think that the best place that cups should be is at sea, because you can't weigh stuff on scales at sea. So I understand why cups exist for boats.
Okay. Right. Who's next? Keep it to the brief. Language. Words, language. Okay. Gurdeep. I know Gerd's going to have a good one.
I've got a couple. Mine is tikka. Tikka means peace, but you get tikka rice, you get tikka whole roast chicken, and I'm like, what is the is the piece? Is the whole chicken the piece? Like, is the rice? What piece of rice? So for me, this word tikka has come to mean anything vaguely Indian exoticized. But often you'll get like an entire thing, and it's like, is the whole thing one piece? I just don't understand. So that's the one. And chai as well.
Chai tea.
And for me, I'm Punjabi. I had a really interesting quandary with my book because I'm Punjabi, and we call it cha. We don't call it chai. So I had a really interesting debate with my publishers about whether we would call it chai or cha in the book. And we ended up calling it chai, which I feel a little bit like I raised my own Punjabiness with. Another one, this is very sort of related. One of the big quandaries I had with my book was how we would phrase the word British Indian and whether we would hyphenate it or not, which was really interesting. We ended up not hyphenating it because I wanted to put across that I am both British and Indian equally, and I'm not on this kind of conveyor belt of things. So for me, I think it's really interesting to talk about language, because punctuation actually is a really big sort of thing within that as well.
Very good. Ooh. Up at the top. Yes.
Hello. Hands up everyone who says scone. And everybody else is wrong.
Okay, next. That
was a really good one.
Pink shirt. Pink shirt. Pink shirt up, yeah.
Hi there. Sorry, I'd like to weigh in on the foodie debate. Firstly, I dislike it because it's a vague level of ambition. I think we could probably do better. And secondly, because as Sally said, it just means that you like food more than a normal person. So you're defining yourself, well, basically it suggests that you need to have a term for somebody who doesn't like food, as it were, right? So the normal people don't like food is the implication of foodie, which is unnecessary in a lot of cultures.
I don't know, but some people don't like food.
Yeah, some people eat.
My dad once said to me if he could take a pill every day instead of having to eat 3 meals, he would. Like, he just does, he's just not interested.
It's a sad indictment.
It's very sad, yeah, and it's amazing that it's so chalk and cheese, but it is true. Yeah.
Someone has the mic.
Yeah.
Are you going?
I haven't got a fresh word, but it was just the discussion earlier about the word chef. Like, I work in food, but I wouldn't call myself a chef because I'm not formally trained. I'm self-taught. So I would feel weird calling myself a chef, having worked with chefs who are, like, you know, have gone through culinary school and things like that. I've just kind of made it up as I went along and got a bit lucky every so often. So I don't feel right calling myself a chef. I don't know if that's just me having an imposter syndrome issue, but I just wanted to add that little bit in there.
I don't know, I think like artists and musicians, you know, we can be self-taught. I wrote a book, but I didn't, you know, do a writing degree.
You're still a writer?
I'm still a writer. Oh God, too many. Malaka, she's got...
I've got something to say, yes. My word would be mango, but anybody who knows me knows that that would be my word. I think, like South Asian mangoes, there is such a diversity of different varieties, different flavors. They start at the beginning of spring and they go until the end of summer. But I feel like when they have moved to the West, they've been homogenized. As to, yes, Alfonso is king, and then if you're a bit more like not mainstream, you will know about Kesar, but like I come from a long intergenerational, like multi-generational mango growers. There's so many different varieties, and it's just like this homogenization of mangoes that really, really triggers me. Whereas if you go to the outskirts of the city, say for example, in Ilford or Walthamstow or Tooting is a little bit more gentrified now, you will find so many different varieties that are just lumped as honey mango or baby mango. But they have names, and the growers, like my family members, they have put a lot of their blood, sweat, and tears into growing them in like an increasingly climate change where these farmers are the ones who are most impacted. So I would like more justice for mangoes. You can enjoy them, they're amazing, but please just do your research and just go outside the box a little bit with the different varieties.
Right, learn your mango names. Ume, you had one, yes?
A quick comment. I just think it's beautiful that I know, you know, falafel should be fluffy and deep fried, and hummus shouldn't always be creamy, but isn't it so beautiful that most people in the world know what hummus is now, or know what falafel is, or know what gyoza is, or jiaozi? Like, I just think, yes, we can criticize and we can argue on, and that is important also, but globalization is so beautiful, and I think there's value in appreciating, oh, I can eat hummus in 30 different countries in the world, and most people know what hummus is here.
But my point was that not everyone knows what hummus is. Because then you can be served fava bean hummus, and then they'll tell you it's hummus. You know, a lot of people say something is hummus when essentially it is not. If you've got peas in there, it's not hummus. You know, if you swap out the chickpea, if there's no chickpea, that means there's no hummus. You know, the word is used interchangeably with dip. And I'm sorry, if I'm served hummus that does not have a chickpea, that's not hummus, you know. But it's beautiful that we can have falafel. People know what falafel is, they know what hummus is, but there's so much more to our cuisines than just falafel and hummus.
And I think it's a level of, you know, where you are at this kind of like staged. So for me, if I see that someone, a British chef or a restaurant has put Borsch on the menu, I'd be delighted. Because we're just kind of like at this very beginning of our, I just want to popularize Ukrainian culture because it's not hummus. Like loads of people don't know and like would blend some beetroots and do that. So yeah, I see your point from my point of view. Please make Borsch.
It starts with education, and there's levels of education, but it needs to start somewhere, is my point.
Yeah, good point. Okay.
Hi, sorry, I want to jump on that discussion. So I've been working in food marketing for the last 4 years. So maybe I know the reason why some of the people naming cultural food with easier way. So it's one way to approach a non-cultural people. But I think I'm also a foodie. Sorry for the guy out there. I like foodie because it's true. Some people don't really care about food. So I also know the importance of us as a marketer or as a brand or someone who need money from food to educate the people the real word or what Sally said or what Salma said about the hummus, what is hummus it is. So I think even though it's an easier to approach people, to reach people, but we has to have an obligation to also educate what is the real thing. So yeah, that's my take on globalizations of food.
If anyone works at Sainsbury's, this is the 3rd year in a row that char siu has been misspelled. It's been spelled char sui, and it's S-I-U. FYI. And then you next. I'm making you run around.
Hey, yeah, just to jump on the point again, I think everything that was said about hummus was very valid, and Egyptian mac and cheese and the like, but I am exactly the kind of person that would call a dish like an Egyptian mac and cheese, and I just wanted to say the reason why. It would be because like I am like the only foodie really in like my family and friends, and it would just be like a way of me making something I've made more accessible to them, and I think that's valid as well. That's all I wanted to say.
Can we get the mic here, and then this person next.
Yes, thank you. I have a question regarding yogurt. Like, whenever you see Greek yogurt, I'm just wondering, why is it always Greek yogurt? Because, like, my question, right, I can ask. My understanding is just because yogurt is 10% fat, that's the definition of Greek yogurt. But it's, like, so important that it's Greek. And sometimes I would see just Turkish yogurt in certain cookbooks, and I know that lots of people would get super offended if you call 10% fat yogurt that is Greek yogurt, Turkish yogurt. What do you think about it, and like using country next to the word to emphasize the cultural origin of it? Because I understand the struggle of Greek people and why for them it's so important that it's Greek and not Turkish. But what are your thoughts? And yeah.
I think it's an interesting thing about the prestige of that item. Greek yogurt is very kind of as a kind of high-end form of yogurt that we would buy, right?
But they also taste different.
It tastes different, and it's made a specific way, and now you get Greek style, which is a way of like CMA, cover your ass, because you have like Fage, that is like the real Greek yogurt, and then everyone else has to call it Greek style. But I don't know why people don't just put 10% fat yogurt in their cookbook.
Georgian cuisine, actually, I'm glad to say, has kind of avoided that. Or at least I don't know how much people know, but in books, like I'm like, it's called mazzoni. And I was like, and it's a very specific bacteria that makes it as well. It's this very specific regional thing that makes it a Georgian yogurt, and it's called mazzoni. So I have put my foot down on calling it that in one of my books.
Okay, you get 4 minutes left. Yes.
Hi, thank you for the conversations. Really eye-opening and like really thought-provoking. And I love that yogurt conversation just came before me. I'm from Turkey, and it is one of the biggest food fights that we have with Greek. It's like Greek yogurt, why it's not Turkish yogurt? It's like they're slightly different tastes with similar things, but I think it is originally, not originally, but I think Bulgarians own it as a food item, I think. But my word is actually sarma. It is translated as stuffed wine leaves, and that's why I think it's lumped under dolma category. But actually, the word sarma is coming from sarmak, which is to wrap, to roll. And I feel like not referring it as sarma, it kind of taking the action a bit, the work of labor behind it. Because similar to other Middle Eastern cultures, food is really important in our culture too. And whenever I go to visit my family, just like one of the first questions my mom asked me, do you want sarma ready? And I know the labor behind it, and I know it's coming from that love, and then she puts that love into that labor. So I feel like I would like to fight for that, calling that sarma, and then correct everyone that is not dolma.
I love that.
To make that point.
Okay, right behind you. I think this will be our last one, maybe penultimate.
Hi, so I'm Shaila. I'm from India, so I'm surprised this one hasn't come up yet. But the word curry, because I feel like this is such like a. I think it's been so contentious. Like I remember when I was in university, we had like a statistics class where like some statisticians have started like measure what constitutes a curry, like how many like spices would it take, and I think. This is kind of just like a hangover from like European colonialism. I think it started when the Portuguese came to Goa, and then I think the British popularized it, and it just like I think very unfairly like standardizes, homogenizes, like similar to like the gyoza conversation we had. Like it kind of just like dumbs down all of these like wide array of flavors and like diversity of like for lack of a better word, curries that we do have in South Asia and beyond South Asia, even Southeast Asia, East Asia, like if it's like a Rogan Josh, if it's like a chicken chettinad, if it's a lal mas, call it that, don't just lump it all together. Yeah, thank you.
That's a good one. Do we have time for one more? Okay, one more. One more.
Got 48 seconds.
Okay, I'll be super quick, and it's actually quite similar to yours. It's curry powder, which I see sometimes in recipes, and I don't know if it happens so much in this country. I've seen it in other countries more so, but to me it just feels incredibly reductive just to add a teaspoon or a tablespoon of curry powder when there are so many different spices which need to be called out and respected to be added to a dish.
Great, yes, so much to think about. And I think the takeaway is that we all have to work harder, I guess, when we're thinking about food and language, but also to think about why it is that we're constantly fighting about it. I think it's this fight to be seen and to be recognized. But I wanted to give a big thank you to our panelists. Salma,
thank you.